This is the October 26th poker vlog on Saturday, 7 p.m. It's the first time I'm recording my hand, so this will be exciting. To start with, we wake up with ace 9 off in the big blind. The small blind is called and limps in. And because we're playing shorthanded, I elect to raise first in to 35, which is about 3.5 big blinds. Our opponent on the button decides to call, and then a small blind calls, so it's 3 ways to the flop.
Alright, 3 ways.
The flop is pretty interesting. We get king, king, ace, rainbow on the board. So we get 2 pair on the flop. After taking some time to come to a decision, I decide to bet again for about a third of the pot. And we get a call from the button. Small blind folds, so it's heads up. At this point, I'm feeling pretty good. The opponent we're going against is pretty new, so I think we're in a good spot right now, but we'll wait and see what the turn is. The turn comes the 10 of hearts, so it doesn't really add to anything here. However, I go ahead and decide to check. This is because our opponent that we're playing against on the button can get kind of scared from even the smallest of bets, and because we have some good value, I think it's okay that we check and let him see if he bets or checks back, and he decides to bet for 50 cents, which is a pretty small bet, so I'm pretty sure that it's not representing too much strength, and I quickly call. The river is pretty safe. It comes to 5 of diamonds. It doesn't really complete any draws, and it doesn't really add to either of our hands. I'm pretty sure I got it. However, for some reason, at this point in time, I think I was worried that he had a king. I don't know why I put him on a king, but because I thought he'd had one, I decided to check the river. There may be some merit to checking to see if I can induce a bet on the river as a sort of bluff, but also I don't think that this player bluffs that much, so maybe in hindsight I should have just continued on the river for value. But we go ahead and check, and he checks back. I show the ace, and we take it down.
Oh! Alright. Nice hand.
About 1 orbit later, I have ace 10 off in the big blind position. The button bets 3 big blinds, and it folds around to me. I flick the call, and we go heads up.
Heads up.
The flop comes deuce king 6 rainbow, and I check it over to the button. He c-bets for 25 cents, 2.5 big blinds, and sometimes I would actually fold in this spot, but for this time I decided to call, and we both see a turn card. The turn comes a queen of diamonds, and this card seems to benefit our opponent more than it benefits us. The queen hits his range a lot more since he was a preflop aggressor and we only called preflop, so he's more likely to hold kings and queens here. For that reason, I decided to check it over to him, and he checks back. At this point, I'm pretty sure that he doesn't have 2 diamonds because I think he would have bet, but at the same time, I can't necessarily say that I have 2 diamonds either. The river actually comes a 7 of diamonds, which puts 3 diamonds on the board. However, like I said, I don't think either of us has 2 diamonds, so it's pretty irrelevant thinking about who has the flush here. That being said, I think I made a mistake on the river, because even though ace 10 off has some showdown value, I think I'm betting for too thin value here on the river. And even though he checked the turn, he could still be holding a king or queen. I bet 75 cents, 7.5 big blinds, and he calls. I show my disappointing ace high, and he flips over a queen, so we lose this pot. But I'm actually more concerned about how I play this hand rather than how much I lose in this pot, because I'm sure there's a ton of things we could have done differently. A few hands later, I end up having 10-9 off in the small blind. It's blind v blind, so I raise it up to 3 big blinds, and the big blind min clicks it to 6 bigs. I defend my small blind, and we both see a flop, heads up.
Heads up.
The flop is pretty interesting actually. It comes 9 Jack 7 with 2 diamonds, giving us a gut shot and second pair. We also have backdoor diamonds, which is something to think about as well. So there's a lot of cards that actually help us. Nonetheless, I donk bet for 55 because the player I'm playing against is pretty... He plays his cards face up on the flop. So if he calls this, I know he probably has something, and if he folds, well, I just win the hand. He calls, so I know he has a piece of the board.
Yeah.
The turn gives us 2 pair with 10-9 on the board and 10-9 in our hand. However, this card's actually pretty bad for us because it completes a lot of straights that we didn't make. So because we have showdown value and I can check call even if they do represent a straight, I check it over to him. Our opponent asked to color down to get some green chips to start betting, and so I am pretty sure that he's either got a jack, 2 pair, or a straight. Sometimes he does have a straight draw or flush draw here, but I think the former is more likely. He bets 7.5 big blinds, and because I don't want to go away yet with my 2 pair and gut shot still, I stick around and call. The river comes at an absolute brick, the 2 of clubs, and it changes nothing. Given the action, I don't think it's safe to here because the only hands that he could have that we realistically beat are a jack. I don't think he has missed diamonds, and I don't think he would be betting here with a straight draw that missed. So I go ahead and check it over to see what he does. He bets 20 big blinds, so now I'm really sure that he probably has a straight or a jack. Because he raised pre-flop, I'm pretty sure we can block a couple straights, such as 9-8 and 10-8, and we blocked the jack-10 for the higher 2 pair, but I still feel like he could easily be holding an 8 here. At the same time, we can't just be scared just because there's an 8 that could be out there, and I'm also curious to see what he has, so I call. He turns over a straight, and unfortunately I lose the
I
hand.
thought so, that's why.
It's unfortunate, but we actually read him correctly, so that's pretty good. A couple of orbits later, I'm in the small blind, and I have Queen Deuce suited. It folds around to me, so I raise first in to 30 cents, 3 big blinds, and I get a call from the big blind. Everyone else folds, so it's heads up to the flop. The flop comes Ace 7 King, Rainbow, and because we have a tied image, I think I can represent a few aces and kings. We also have backdoor spades, so this is a good flop for us. I continue for a half pot, and my opponent calls. At this point, I'm sure he has something, because this player probably would fold with no pair or piece of the board. The turn comes a queen, and now we have third pair. I check it over to my friend in the big blind, and it doesn't take too long for him to check back. At this point, I think I have a good chance of winning the hand. And when the river comes another queen, I'm definitely sure I'm probably going to win this hand. We have trips, and unfortunately the pot isn't too big, so maybe I should have bet the turn. But I think if we bet the turn there, then a lot of the air hands that he might be holding would probably just fold. While a lot of the hands that he could have that hold an ace or a king would call. Anyway, when I try to trade out some chips, he starts acting up, telling me that he's gonna fold the hand if I bet that much, which gives me an idea that he has absolutely nothing on this board. However, I still do want to try to get a call for the maximum price. Funny enough, I end up asking him how much I could bet for him to call, to which he replies 50 cents, or 5 big blinds. So to mess with him a bit, I bet 4.5 bigs to be a little cheeky, and I know he's honest, so I know he'll call, to which he does. And I show my trips and take down the pot. Next up, I'm on the button with deuces, and 2 players behind me limp. Typically I would raise here, but I thought it was fine to just call too. That way if we get 3-bet, we don't face the pressure of folding. The small blind calls and the big blind checks, so it's a family pot to the flop.
It's like 57 now.
Oh, yeah.
Increase.
Bro, Lena's so shit.
Like, dude, I know it's absolute dick.
Every time he just shits himself.
The flop comes 6 ace ace with 2 diamonds on the board. We don't hold the diamonds, but we do have a pair, and because the board is also paired, the likelihood that someone has an ace is really low. The big blind bets 2.5
The
bigs,
first turn.
under the gun folds, and the cutoff calls. It's a great price for me to call and see the turn, so I go ahead and call.
Is it still the best? Ferrari might have the best now.
Maybe.
Because like Oscar's been awful in so
Yeah.
McLaren hasn't been.
The turn comes to 7 of clubs, which doesn't help us much, but we do have position so we can see what other people do first. The big blind bets 50, and so at this point I'm pretty sure he has an ace. He could also have a 6, but I think he plays pretty scared, so usually when he double barrels like this, it's usually an ace. The cutoff calls, but he could be in here with any 2 cards really, and I'm also getting a good price to call, so I call. Now I think this turn call is actually a bad move, because I already knew that my opponent probably had an ace, and I think I was just digging a hole for myself, but the bet was also really small. So I'm not sure. Overall, I think 9 times out of 10 I should be folding this turn. However, I did smack it on the river, because a 2 of clubs came. I improved from 2 pair to boat, and now my read actually helps me because I'm pretty sure one of them has an ace, the big blind in particular, so I can charge big and get maximum value. The big blind bets 125 for 12.5 big blinds, and the cutoff makes a reluctant call. I raised it up to $3, but I really should have gone much bigger. I think I could have gone to 5 or 6 and still gotten a call. Nonetheless, the big blind calls, and I show my boat. I'm not very proud of this hand, because there's a lot of things I did wrong and a lot of things I could have done better. But I got lucky, so I thought it'd be fun to show.
I knew you had an ace. I was like, I'm fucked. I'm so fucked. I called this. I'm like, oh fuck, I'm stupid. And then I'm 2 again. I was like.
In the next notable hand we pick up, we have Ace King off in the big blind. Under the gun limps, and the button also limps. The small blind raises it up to 2.5 bigs, and we 3-bet to 10 bigs. The button calls, and the small blind calls. It's 3 ways to the flop. The flop comes Queen, Jack, King, Rainbow. We flop top, but this is a highly coordinated board. Even so, it really benefits our range, since I have a tight image and I 3-bet pre-flop. The small blind donks into me for 5 bigs, and this usually either means that it's a bluff, or he's got a great made hand or draw. To get some more information, as well as protect my top pair, I raised it up to 15 bigs. The button gets out of the way, and the small blind thinks for a bit before calling. The 2 of us take it heads up to a turn, which is the 8 of clubs. Now since we're in position, we get to see what the small blind does. The small blind bets again for 150, and we're more than happy to call. However, we do have to be careful because even though he is a wild player, this is the same line he would take if he had a straight. Although I don't think we should be too worried because he has to have exactly ace 10, and we block ace 10 because we have ace king, meaning that there are fewer combinations of ace 10 that he could have. The river comes the queen of diamonds, which isn't the best card for us, but we shouldn't discredit our top. I'm kinda curious to see what the small blind does in this position, and he ends up throwing in $5 chips, which equates to around 50 big blinds. This is a sizable bet, more than half the pot, so we do have to be careful. And in this situation, it's kind of tough because our opponent is very loose, and he also previously mentioned wanting to make more bluffs. However, he could be doing this easily with a queen or a straight. Even though I block ace 10, I don't block 10-9, which is the other straight which could be on the board. He could easily have a queen here though. So really the only hands I beat are bluffs, a worse king, a jack, or an 8. With all of these in mind, I eventually come to the conclusion to call, and fortunately my ace-king holds. However, I do wish I would have asked him to show his hand since he did raise the river, and it would have been nice to get some information. The next hand we have is 7-5 suited. We're on the small blind, so usually we'd want to avoid playing hands like this out of position, and looking back I should have just called, but I think I just wanted to isolate the limper, which is why I raise. I make it 40 to go, and only the limper calls, who's in the cutoff. We take it heads up to a flop. The flop comes 10-5-6, with 2 hearts on the board and backdoor diamonds for us. I continue for 40 bigs, which is around half the pot, and the cutoff calls. The turn comes to 5 of clubs, and this gives us trips. It's a pretty sneaky trips too since we raise pre-flop. Since my opponent likes to bet big on these boards that are low and connected, I actually choose to check and trap him into thinking that I have nothing. He responds by betting 10 big blinds, and I was thinking about check raising, but I just decided to call this turn. The river comes the ace of spades, and this is a good river card for us for several reasons. If our opponent is holding any ace, we can get them to call a sizable river bet. I make it 15 big blinds, and after thinking about it for a while, my opponent decides to fold. After some thought, I actually think I should have bet turn or even check raised the turn, because then I could have realized more value with my trips. I also think I shouldn't be raising these kinds of hands from the blind. We get another suited connector this time on the button when we're supposed to be playing it, instead of playing it early position on the blinds. Under the gun straddles is 20 bigs, the hijack calls, and the cutoff min clicks. I don't want to be 4-betting this hand, but I don't necessarily want to let it go to just 3-bet, and so I think it's okay to call. The small blind 4-bets to 120, around 12 big blinds. I don't like to see this, but since both the hijack and cutoff call, I'm getting a good price to call myself. I put in the call for 12 big blinds, and the 4 of us see a flop. The flop is 3-2-4 with 2 clubs on the board, and this is excellent for us. We have 4 to the flush, as well as a gut shot. The small blind bets 22.5 big blinds, and so already right away I'm putting him on a sort of pocket pair, overcards, or something similar. To my surprise, both the hijack and cutoff call, and because we have implied odds, we shouldn't be going anywhere anytime soon. I put in the chips, and we all take it to a turn. The turn comes as 7 of diamonds, which doesn't do much for us, except for give us some showdown value, because now we have top pair. I can tell the small blind didn't like that all of us called the flop, so he checks. Both the hijack and cutoff follow suit, and I check behind to see a card as well. Although now that I think about it, betting here might be okay too, but I figured that I didn't want to get check raised by the small blind, and so at the time that's why I checked back. The river comes to 4 clubs, and we hit our flush. It's a low flush nonetheless, but I don't think that anyone else has a flush. This is especially true when everyone else checks. The action checks all the way to me. The sizing I choose is 60 big blinds, which is around 60 or 70% of the pot. I could honestly have done an overpot size though, because no one's really expecting me to have a flush here. And since especially a couple people at the table that I'm playing against currently like to call down pretty loose, I could have gone for a sizing of 80 or 90 big blinds. Even so, only the hijack calls, and I show my flush and take down the pot. In the last hand of the night, we finish the night off with a bang. I peel 2 black queens, which is a hand we're happy to see even under the gun. I raise first in to 3 bigs, and the button 3 bets to 10 bigs. The small blind calls, the big blind folds, and we're about to 4-bet to 40 big blinds. We get the button and the small blind to call, although the small blind seems to have a less worthy hand. There's 120 big blinds already in the pot, and it's 3 ways. The flop comes all spades, with 7 king jack of spades, so I have pretty mixed emotions here. On one hand there's an overcard, and 3 spades on the flop. However, we are holding the queen of spades, so if we hit a spade we could get the second nut flush. The small blind rips it all in, and I'm faced with a pretty difficult decision. I have a pretty good idea that he has a flush, but the question is, am I getting the right odds to call? His remaining stack is 2/3 of the pot, and the only flush I could be losing to here is the ace high flush. Given those odds, I think it's a good decision to call. As I expected, he turns over 4-3 of spades for the 4 high flush. Even though he is the favorite though, all we need is a spade to win. We agree to run it once, and right away we miss the turn. Turn comes 3 of diamonds, a total whiff, but when we turn over the river card, it comes to 2 of spades, giving me the queen high flush. As the underdog, I managed to win the hand, but I'm still not sure if I made the right decision to call. In my mind I think so, but I could just be being results oriented. Well, that's the end of the video. I went up $41.50 this week, which is great, but I feel like there's a lot I have to learn. I made quite a few mistakes, and in many situations, I just got lucky, which is why I didn't lose too much. But I plan to post these so that way I can learn from them, and because other people can see these videos, including the people I play against, it'll force me to constantly grow, change, and modify my strategy. I also don't know if I can keep making these kinds of videos because I'm still in school and my classes are starting to get pretty difficult. However, I'll do the best I can, and maybe I won't be able to do voiceovers over each hand, and maybe I won't be able to post each hand, but I'll try to show and dub as many as I can. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next week.